I'm in the WACHT High School auditorium. In the 1930s, this auditorium was graced with the music of a young violin prodigy by the name of John Ain. A Bulgarian immigrant himself, Ain came here with his family at a very young age and quickly adopted all the things that would make a kid American, including being really active in his high school. John Ain played the violin like perhaps no other performer in WACHT High School history has. So good was he played with several Toledo area bands and then was accepted on scholarship to the Juilliard Academy in New York City. This gifted young man, who was going to be a professional musician, ends up getting drafted in the middle of the war. And in the Battle of the Bulge, John Ain is going to be taken prisoner by the Germans. Today, we're going to talk about the Battle of the Bulge, one of the critical battles of the Second World War's European front, and one that could have gone either way for the Allies. John Ain was not lucky, and the battle ended in his capture and eventually in his death. So join me today as we talk a little bit about the Battle of the Bulge and some of the Toledo men who were part of it.
The Germans didn't call the Battle of the Bulge the Battle of the Bulge. Their operation name for it was WACHT am Rhein. It's the name of a German song, and it literally translates to the Watch on the Rhine. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep the Americans from pushing through this frontier and getting to the Rhine River and into the traditional heartland of Germany. Hitler believed this WACHT am Rhein offensive could break the back of the Allies. It was going to bust through in between, basically, where the British were and where the Americans were. And he believed that if the British get surrounded up in the north, it may force them to seek a peace treaty. It would break the Allies in half, and he could, with a separate peace with the British, the Americans would have to withdraw. So he puts his forces in nearly the same place from the 1940 invasion. If you remember, we said the reason they went through the Ardennes forest was that the Allies believed it was impenetrable, and it was past the end of the defenses that the French had on the Maginot Line. So he's going back to not exactly the same place, but a very close place to where the forces had come through in 1940. And now it's 4 years later, and they're trying the same thing, through the mountains and through the forests of the Ardennes. The Bulge, the reason it's called the Bulge, is, as you can see, the German forces are creating a bulge in the Allied lines. The idea is, again, it's going to split the British from the U.S., and the push to the sea is going to isolate four armies in the north, and force Montgomery to surrender and force the British to sign this separate peace. Again, you can see the bulge by the dotted lines here. This is what they're trying to create, is a push from where they are in Germany up to Antwerp on the sea, and then isolate all of these Allied troops who are up here. That's the big idea for Hitler's offensive, the WACHT am Rhein. Now, we see our old friend counterintelligence show up. The last time we talked about it in Operation Fortitude, it was the Allies who were using counterintelligence to fool the Axis before a major offensive. And this time it's going to be the Axis using counterintelligence to fool the Allies before a major offensive. So Germany is kind of using the entire Allied playbook. Fake radio broadcasts to make people believe they're going where they ain't. Creation of a fake army to the far north to keep Montgomery's guys pinned up there while they hit down here. And the Allies buy it. So they use that sector of the Ardennes where the Germans are actually going to be coming. They take war-weary units like the 83rd Infantry that's been just decimated throughout this. They put units like them down in the Ardennes sector. Brand new units that are coming online, they put down there because they haven't experienced battle yet, so they're not going to put them in the toughest place. They're going to put them in a place that everybody thinks is safe. As you guys can imagine, this is a recipe for disaster. Your weakest units are going to be exactly where the German spear thrust is going to be. So the battle gets launched in a near blizzard on the 16th of December. And if you remember from our last unit, we talked about how the campaign through the Hürtgen Forest ends on the 15th, and now they're going to launch this massive new attack in the north on the very next day. The blizzard is really a gift for the Germans, because by this point, the German Air Force really doesn't have the ability to do much of anything against the Allied air forces. And now the blizzard makes it impossible for us to use our air power to target their formations on the ground. So General Winter kind of helps out the Germans in this case. They make very rapid advances through those units that we just talked about. The half-strength units that have been in combat for too long, the new units that are inexperienced. And in one of these inexperienced units is the fellow we talked about at the outset, John Ain. John Ain's 106th Infantry Division is completely surrounded near St. Vith, and 8,000 men are taken prisoner. It is the largest American surrender of the Second World War, and guys like Ain get marched far to the east to go into prison camps, and that's in one of those prison camps is where John Ain is going to die. Eisenhower and Patton realize it's a disaster, but they also realize in this disaster is an opportunity. If the Germans are creating this bulge so fast, that bulge, if you imagine it pushing this way, it's going to be weak on the sides. The fighting forces are all at the front. So along the sides here are going to be all the supply troops, right? Bringing in reinforcements, bringing in extra weapons and food and ammunition. If these troops get up here, why don't we launch our attack not at the front? Why don't we launch our attack on the sides and cut these guys off and surround them and destroy them in detail? Pinch off the bulge. Patton pretty famously looks at the map in a meeting of the top commanders, and Patton is said to have smiled and say, "Oh, hell, Ike, let's let them go all the way to the sea. Let them keep going. Keep bringing as many troops as they want through that bulge. And then when we cut them off and destroy them, it's less we're going to have to fight on our way to Berlin." So in this offensive, there's an opportunity. Let me try to show you that on the map one more time. You see how they're going to create this bulge? And once that bulge gets further out here, if you launch your attack down this way, up this way, you're going to be able to cut them off. And all of these forces that have launched this massive attack, when you cut them off, you're going to cut them off from supplies, and either they're going to surrender because they have no more supplies or food or weapons or ammunition, or they're going to surrender because you're going to bloody them terribly. So that's basically the way the battle plays out. Now, was it all sunshine and roses for the Allies? Absolutely not. The 101st Airborne gets called into this mess, and they get surrounded in the Belgian city of Bastogne. And Bastogne is a really little town. It's like smaller than Bowling Green. If you've ever been out to Bowling Green, it's smaller than Bowling Green. It's probably, I don't know, maybe Maumee size, maybe even a little smaller than Maumee. And the 101st Airborne is in this town, and they get surrounded by German troops. They are down to 1/3 rations, which basically means one meal a day. Each soldier has 10 bullets, 10 rounds of ammunition. That's all you get for today. The situation was pretty much hopeless. But the Airborne are not the sort of people who understand the word hopeless. So the German general sends a message to the American general in charge of 101st Airborne, General McAuliffe, and gives him the opportunity to surrender like a gentleman. McAuliffe replies with one word: nuts, which is basically a 1940s blank you message. And it becomes very famous among his troops. It's a huge morale booster. The guys, yes, they're hungry. Yes, they're cold. Yes, they're scared. But now they kind of realize our leaders got our back. We aren't giving up. Easy Company of the 506, which is made famous in the book and TV series Band of Brothers, leads an amazing raid that breaks the German line. They are able to get resupplied. And with that, it's really just kind of a downhill slog for the Germans. Now, once the American forces encircle them, the German situation is truly hopeless. And as a result of the Battle of the Bulge, 100,000 Germans are killed or taken prisoner. If you think about that, that's just a massive number. That would be 1/3 of the population of the city of Toledo, killed or taken prisoner in a 30-day period. For the Americans, this was no spring picnic. This was a deadly trade. We lost 42,000 dead and wounded in this. And by the 25th of January, 40 days after the beginning of it, the war is back to its original lines. So you say, okay, well, nothing changed. Well, I would submit to you a lot changed. The Germans are down 100,000 of their best soldiers. They had pulled some of their best units off the Eastern Front from fighting the Soviets to fighting the British and the Americans. And so it's not just that they lost 100,000 guys, which is already terrible. They lost 100,000 of their most battle-hardened, trained soldiers. And honest to goodness, after this point, the German army is basically broken by these losses. And as we'll talk about in the next video, it's just a matter of time before the Germans are going to have to fall back to Berlin and resistance is going to crumble. So, I hope this was useful to you. I hope it was informational for you. Thanks for sticking with me. Take care and be well.